Hello, everyone. Welcome to Osquery Office Hours. It is February. It's been very snowy here in Boston. Not sure where the rest of you are, but here, a lot of snow. Anyhow, welcome to Osquery Office Hours. First up, announcements. I don't have any. Anyone else? Okay. Well, next up, open questions. General sentiment, general purpose of this section is to allow anyone in the community at this meeting bring up any questions they're blocked on or they want to talk about. Given that I recognize all of you, I suspect there is nothing for this section. In which case, we can maybe just go jump into some agenda items, of which we have only one that I added. So I started testing 5.2 and promptly ran into the fact that we removed the UTC flag, which is at least half my fault, which breaks anyone who has an older Osquery config. So I PR'd a thing that adds a no-op UTC flag back in just to sort of preserve a compatibility. And I'm going to suggest that we should make a 5.2.3 or a 5.2.2 to include that and any other bugs people have found in the 5.2 release. I haven't found any other bugs yet, but we can go a little bit longer. I don't know if anyone else is testing 5.2 yet.
Not more than we did during development. We asked the clients to try it, and we haven't heard back. So nobody tries it until it's released. That's the catch-22.
It's pre-release.
Yeah, I know, but
I'm gonna keep testing. I don't want to cut a 5.2.2 now, just in case we find something else and necessitate a 5.3 or 5.2.3. I'm trying to hold off a little bit on PR merges that seem large, but like if they feel reasonable, just merge as always. That's my sense. Feel free to disagree or push in another direction if anyone wants to advocate.
We can merge the PR with the changelog notes, and I think that's one way to make forward progress. Even though it's maybe, I don't know if it's going to go on the releases page, but it's going to have to be updated anyway, right?
That's actually a great thing. So the changelog, the reason I haven't pushed forward on that is I want to create some kind of thing to sort of indicate the deprecated tables. And I think I'll probably like create an issue per table because I think we pulled 2 or 3 tables out of 5.2. And I think that's okay. We just didn't do a good job of telling anyone. So I kind of got myself stuck thinking about how to tell people that in the changelog.
Pulled them out of the M1 build specifically.
Yeah, but some of those will probably go away in future builds, or some of them maybe we'll need to bring back. I don't really know, so I feel like I've just got myself stuck thinking about how to note that. I think the thing to do will be to create issues for those tables so that if anyone wants to talk about them, they can just go talk on the issues, and then we can link the issue into the changelog. And I think there are 2 or 3 tables. No big deal. I just got stuck doing it. So I'll try and pick that up again. I can also try and send a note to core asking if anyone else has tested and if there are any other bugs people want to try and any other 5.2 specific bugs.
Okay.
So we have opened 2 issues for the LLDP neighbors and the smart drive info table.
Yeah.
So those are present. They are blueprints because they also propose to deprecate. Yeah. I think the third one you are referring to is the CPU ID one, which could not be implemented because it's the same thing as ARM 64.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a problem that we dropped any of the tables. I'm just thinking about how we give people the ability to ask questions or advocate for them to be re-included in some way or another or whatever. But thank you for pointing out we already have issues. I'll try and make sure I find those.
So what if we created a milestone for 5.2.2? You think that's going to make it any more clear on when that'll come out?
There is one. So I guess I'd ask a different, who are we trying to raise clarity to? Are you advocating that we make some firm agreement to the community?
I get asked pretty frequently, when can we have this next release with the changes that we're looking for? Or I don't have an answer, so that's why a milestone would help.
I feel like it's a little bit of a shell game, right? Because if you pointed at a milestone, the milestone doesn't I think the thing I feel like I'm struggling with, maybe you're struggling with, is we don't have firm acceptance criteria for releases, right? We declare a release stable when roughly it's been tested on my fleet enough, and I'm just like, yeah, it's probably stable, and no one else has found anything. But that's real squidgy.
Kind of related to that, when we did the work on packaging, eventually I want to have automated testing of packages that come out of CI, just sanity checks, just are the locations correct? Because I know I got a few of them wrong during the transition. But it would potentially use a lot of GitHub Actions minutes.
Do we have any limit on those?
I don't think so. We're a public project, so we don't. As long as you're doing them in the public repos, not in the code signing repo, I don't think there's a limit on them.
Yeah.
It is a little complex because it's per OS because it differs, and ideally I would have to.
This depends on what we want to do. So we can certainly unpack almost anything from Linux or Mac OS even, right? So if we wanted to verify do the paths in this package match what we think, you can do that from Linux pretty easily. I don't know what it's one of the things that I struggle with, and I struggled with this in Collide as well, is when we have a new release of something, how do I gain confidence that I haven't broken some query somewhere? Because there's so many tables and so much interdependency. And the Osquery test suite is okay, right? We have some amount of select X, make sure we get a row back. But without keeping 1,000 devices with 1,000 little niggly configuration details, I don't know where to go. So I feel like it should be pretty easy for us to make a high level. Does this package put the
sanity test, basically?
Smoke test, sanity test,
yeah. Does the process run, or does it crash, or just
But then sorry, go on, Zach.
I was gonna say I've built some sort of basic sanities test, smoke test, you might call it, around that for not Osquery packaging, but for the packaging that we are generating for our new Orbit auto updater. And it's not far from being able to put a proposed Osquery release into that and verify if at least the Osquery process starts up and can still enroll with a fleet server. But it does not cover, what you just mentioned, Seth, which I agree is probably the biggest challenge. 300 tables there, do they still work?
Do they still work, and do they work in the ways people expect to join them?
Right.
What do you look for when you do those tests with a new release? Maybe we can have a documentation page, hey, this is roughly as a starting point.
Where's
yeah,
that?
I'm asking you, Seth.
I mean, I just roll it out to the beta fleet, and I look to see if anything explodes.
Got it.
So, and then I run it, and then we run it for a little while, and just the reality of building a product around Osquery, we spend a lot of time in the product, right? And if we're like, hey, this doesn't look right anymore, what's going on? But it's a very human process, and every release, I'm incredibly nervous that we'll miss something. I'm pretty confident that we won't miss a crash bug, although we don't test Yara, so right, Yara crash bugs aren't something that I'm likely to stumble over, but I have no confidence that something we don't use heavily isn't randomly corrupting data, right? Like if one of the Windows string quoting functions suddenly stopped quoting UTF-8 strings as they came out of the registry, like would I notice?
Well, yeah, the only answer there is write tests. We have the technology, we have the tools, we have fuzzing, we have ASAN, etc. Obviously, for fuzzing, we can only really cover Linux. Today, I just opened the PR for Windows, but I noticed that the ASAN implementation there might still have issues. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of code, but I don't see any other way. Like one after the other, we have to write tests for our core libraries for each table. Tables right now, the major problem is that the logic is their logic is a bit of a monolith, so it directly returns rows. And while you maybe want to separate a bit more and have APIs that can be tested separately and provided where you can provide input directly to the table so that you mock data, so you don't need to have the environment. Well, obviously, this is not always possible, and you are only testing some level of from a point on. You're not testing the part that is using the actual system APIs and then test the data, but still, I mean, it would be much better than where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're touching on a thing which is right. Like if you think of part of the Osquery stack, right? We've got like some API, some OS API or third-party API, and then we have a table, and then we have like row generation, and then we have like SQLite, and then we have like all these stacks, right? And we've got like tests for various pieces of this. And you could imagine mocking an OS API so that you could test your generation routines. But the thing that scares me is that like there'll be some odd bug where like the generation routine is okay with mocked data, but with like real data, it's like an n+1 problem, or like the p equals np problem, right? There's no perfect answer.
Yeah, I mean, so the only difference between like that's why we have fuzzing or even semantic analysis. So yeah, you need to to expand the domain of the data you are basically testing and not use only fixed tests, which though still do help a lot in the given that we don't have many of them at all. So
yeah, I mean, and then there's the other can of worms of like the OS vendors change stuff, right? Like we have the Wi-Fi table thing happening now, which I think Charvel was looking at, right? We're like the P lists all changed. You're just like, what do we do? So it just feels intractable, and I'm always scared that I'm going to break something, and maybe the answer is nothing to do but keep trying to fix it when we find the problems.
Well, again, it's intractable until we don't increase the test suite.
So we could start with the tests. Can we review what has required us to make a point release? What bugs made it past a intended release, like a pre-release, and then which ones made it too far into actual release? Those are the ones that we can write tests for first.
So the things that have pushed the 5.2 release, right, that have caused 5.2 patch releases, point releases. The first one was the Yara crashing bug. I don't I think your team has more context on that one than I do. And the second one is I approved this, and so a little bit of shame on me, right? Is we made a breaking change to the configuration file, which was reasonable, but also precludes viable upgrade paths, right? When we drop the UTC flag, that's a breaking change, and in dropping it, we created a situation where you can't have, if you want that functionality, you can't have one configuration file that works across the two versions. Which, to be honest, I feel like I should have just remembered and not let us, and fixed on the PR. But so I don't know how to, like, I don't know how. There's no unit test for that.
Yeah, so there are multiple levels. You have, so third-party libraries, you can't do much there, although you're using it, so you hope that you catch them in some way by using, via other tests. But anyway, then you have the core of Osquery. I think that is the most, well, actually, yeah, you have two issues anyway, the core and the tables, because so the tables, we try to write them better. You can have exceptions thrown there, but they are catched, and that's fine. But then you can also have just simple null pointer references, so each table can crash Osquery. The only difference I would say is that even though a table is crashing Osquery, it might not crash it every time. So, like, if you are not querying that table, you're not having the issue. But if you are having a bug in the Osquery core, then it's much more difficult to avoid that bug. So I would say, yeah, we have to have more tests in the core, first of all. That obviously is not easy because the internal APIs are not always, are not always easy to test and separate their logic from everything else. But I would say, yeah, the Osquery core definitely is the first target.
I guess this issue with the flags is kind of these flags are an API of Osquery. The tables and columns are APIs of Osquery, and maybe we ought to try to take a more disciplined look at like semver and thinking if that we need to be careful about when we make non-backwards compatible changes to APIs and make sure that those are only batched up into major version releases. Like, I'm not sure that I think we might get more bang for our buck by just kind of making human guidelines around being careful what we merge for addressing that one, rather than trying to have some way that we flex every possible configuration option or something.
So my gut sense is that semvar doesn't help us, and this is much more of a human factor. And thus, I feel badly because I was the one that approved this particular PR, and also, made some changes in it. So even if we have semvar, a breaking change is still a breaking change. So
Yeah.
what we need to do is we need to minimize breaking changes and come up with patterns to allow depreciation and changes in place, right? And semvar doesn't help you with that. Semvar just gives you a way to put some numbers around it.
It provides you I'd argue it provides a system for thinking about what changes are breaking and not. And maybe we could have, like, I'm not saying Seth, you should have done this. Like, these things are hard, and like it's not easy to always pay attention to this, but I think that sometimes it can be good to say, like, okay, we're making a minor version release. Like, are these changes that are going in compatible with the promises of a minor version release?
So the thing is I sort of like, I agree at some level, but I don't. So I kind of agree at some level, but I feel like I don't agree with the takeaway because I feel like we already do that, right? And the problem is that with the general size of the Osquery project, it's just easy to let something sneak through, and then so it's I don't feel like saying did we consider this question upon doing this, and the answer is kind of yeah I did, and did I make a mistake? Yeah I did, and I'm not beating myself up about it, even if I sound that way. So I don't, but like having like a stricter semvar thing or like a more rigorous thing, I feel like it's just got to screw up a few times, and then we'll be like, nope, really, don't do it again.
Yeah.
And then it sticks. So I don't know. Maybe Mike's question was like, well, what snuck through? Like, what's caused us to make point releases? And if we carry that forward, like, what things would we make tests for? And I agree that I'm not sure there's a test to like around flag compatibility. And I don't know enough to know if there was a test that should have caught the Yara one.
Well, that one may have been, yeah, it would have been more of a table test that might be present later. Then, like, if we think to start with adding more Osquery core tests, that would have been one of the last. But still, I don't know. I mean, testing is the, like, sure, there are procedure definitely pretending to have higher quality code or when PR come in. But I feel like we have already a lot of technical depth. So sure, again, for Yara, this was a recent change, something new, etc. But I don't know. I mean, again, we have a lot of technical depth already. So
I mean, one of the ways, though, I interpret Mike's question is not to say which of these things should we already have tests for, but instead one way to say is like, oh, well, we just accidentally stumbled into a Yara bug. Maybe we should write a Yara test now. Right, forward looking.
I think we can. So I don't know. Then I leave someone else give the idea, but I don't think you can really easily differentiate them. Like any bug. So a bug that, because it's a crash, can appear in any piece of the Osquery code. So the only difference is how likely it is that code path is hit during the execution of a query. So that's why, yes, you can say tables, but maybe tables crash only on a very specific edge case that doesn't happen as often, etc., etc. So maybe tables can be left for later, but for sure, Osquery core is what is getting hit the most. So
I guess maybe the thing I just said is sort of one of the cruxes of all computer testing, right? Which is that either you are testing for the bugs you've already known and fixed, or you're sort of going down the fuzzing and speculative test route. And like I don't know that there's much middle ground.
you do both.
I'm sure.
You have to do everything. I know, but yeah.
Okay, well, so we think we need more package tests, and we think those are tractable. And Stefano, you think we need more tests in the core code paths. I don't know the C++ tools well enough to even know how to get a solid coverage report out.
Oh, yeah, it is possible. So OSS fuzz is doing it on the harnesses. So yeah, we can we can enable it.
Can we see, like, I'm used to languages where I can like get some sort of marked up view of my code of like, here's all the things that didn't get tested, right? Or like
yeah.
Ruby and Go both do that.
So there are a couple of details that we still have to check on how it works there, because so the coverage, you can just, there are a couple of flags you can compile your code with, and that will output prof raw file that then you can with some tools, you can have it match with your source code, so you really see the single lines that have been hit, and so you see which branches, etc., etc.
It could be
My only doubt with the percentage of coverage is that it might be a bit off, since we are, for some specific reason, we are basically we need to link more than we actually use, and that code is staying in the binary there, even if it's not ever called, and I think it offsets, it will forever permanently offsets, like even if you have 100% real coverage of all the code you actually execute, it will never exit out as 100%. But
I feel less worried about like some floating point coverage number, and I'm like, if you come in saying we should have more tests in core, then I feel like what I want to understand is where are we missing tests in core, and can we see annotated source code, because that probably helps us there. So I mean, I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, OSS Fuzz already does that. So for instance, we have for the config, and yeah, you can see which paths. Obviously, that only tells you what the current corpus or even randomized input has been able to touch, but yeah, you have an output there that is readable, human readable.
Maybe this is an area we can sink some time or something.
Another thing that comes to mind for me is a very common place where we've seen issues, and that I suspect we'll continue to see issues, is as the operating systems update, these tables breaking, like the Wi-Fi networks table that Charvel is working on, or I'm sure we will have similar things coming up for Windows 11. And I imagine there's also parallels on Linux. And so I wonder if that would also be a place to invest in some testing, and maybe our current integration tests cover that to some extent, but maybe they can do better, and we could take advantage of GitHub Actions has different versions of
but how?
Mac OS at least you can run on.
What would this look like? Because this is the bit where I start. So let's take the Wi-Fi table, right? Or actually, let's take the one that's bugging me more is the IP tables table, right? So the IP tables table, how would we notice?
So the IP tables table is broken, you're saying?
The IP tables table is broken on modern Linuxes that don't ship legacy IP tables code. The underlying implementation has moved away from one thing to another thing, and it's now secretly NF tables under the hood or something.
And how does the breakage manifest? You get no data, or the data's
I'm trying
wrong?
to remember if you either get no data or it's an error. But let's assume no data, because that's the hard to detect case, right? If it throws into error, anything that queries it'll be fine. But if you go from getting expected data to no data, but the only expected data is the data that you yourself have set, that's hard. Or like the Wi-Fi table is maybe similar, right? If you hit the Wi-Fi table.
Exactly, and I think the problem is compounded that tests are usually run in a VM, so some of these APIs don't even get hit.
Yeah, the only way would be to have, well, in general, as a foundation, more money and be able to spin up VMs, and then you can set up environments there. But you're still staying behind with new things that change. You have to stay aware of things that change. Again, news for each platform. Like again, the change from IP tables to something else, you have to check every distribution. Yeah, I really don't think there is another way beyond writing code that doesn't. So we have to write code that doesn't crash Osquery if something like that happens. Even better, obviously, if we can provide any warning or errors as you were mentioning, but I don't see how much, like again, without having resources, I don't see how much we can do.
Even with resources, like, so the way we handle this a little bit internally, and we're mostly Mac folks, right, is like, when there's a new Mac release, we probably have laptops that are on that beta already, and we're just like excitedly clicking around, being like, does this OS work how I want? Oh, hey, this feature changed, right? And then, but it requires this deep knowledge of both the OS and then OS queries that you're like, hey, this thing in the OS changed. How does it affect the tables that I care about? And it's easy if you're a vendor and you have an app and you're just like, oh, this data I expected to get, I don't get back from my new shiny machine. But I don't know how to automate that, because it just requires this incredibly deep, specific knowledge and willingness to jump into the new OS and just be like, what's different? Without kind of just creating a very large, co-joined, if I use Puppet or Chef or Ansible to create a machine that looks like this, and I run these sets of queries, do I get this JSON back out, kind of thing? And even that, I feel like, is going to fall down on something like the Wi-Fi tables, because you may not even have visibility into that running in a VM. So then like the next step is you go like, this is my room full of test machines that I have handcrafted, and when they're
And there's still edge cases, like, just to take Wi-Fi tables example forward, like, there's a weird edge case with a Wi-Fi network that is a captive portal, which I don't encounter in my day-to-day life. I just happened to be at a coffee shop and encountered that. So
yeah,
I don't think we have to be asked for that. Like, when I meant we have to have more tests is more with the thing that stay a bit more static, the internals of the query. But obviously, again, the data that comes, that varies. Like, the only other way is somehow involving more our community to do tests with Osquery before release. But obviously, that's pretty difficult. Like, I don't know, there are other projects which are different things. I don't know, artist tools, those, that crowd always is, does look forward to the new release or even alpha release of that product and tests it. So you have people testing it. But in our space and the specific Osquery use case, I'm not sure how you can attract those kind of.
This maybe goes back to some original thinking. So Osquery is an interesting product in that I don't think our users are traditional users. Our users are predominantly vendors, or people who are large enough in-house to be replacing a vendor with an in-house solution. Right? Because you have artists who are like, I love my little art program or my music synthesizer or whatever my video editing is, right? And those are things used by predominantly users, although sometimes studios. But like, as an end user, Osquery is a weird tool. So
it's too tied to hardware also. So
and maybe we just need to cultivate more vendor relationships. Get more people involved. Because I know there's a lot of vendors who are shipping Osquery, but most of them I have never seen on Slack. Like, I just sort of stumble over them while digging around, EDR tools. Y'all may also have the same discoveries I do.
The ones we don't work with, yeah.
I'll like go. Bitdefender ships Osquery somewhere, which I noticed because it's in their open source disclosures. They
Microsoft
Collide
Defender too.
Fleet ones. Microsoft ships it. Cisco ships it.
Cisco ships it.
Let's start putting their logos on the site and like a passive aggressive, like, thank you to our non-contributing. I hope they don't watch The Office Hours. We love you guys.
One vendor that I found shipped Osquery, I found because I happened to be walking the Go module graph and I discovered that they used some of the launcher public stuff. So like some vendor used launcher, which clearly implies they're using Osquery.
Oh,
All these weird little details.
yeah.
It's validating.
It's validating, but sometimes you're like, please help test.
Yeah. Yeah. Just open issues. That would be fine.
I mean, these are like perennial software problems that we're circling around, right? So, OS Query has had a lot of success despite these issues, and I think it's important that we continue these conversations and try to improve. But I think we're not in a dire situation right now, at least.
I agree. No, you're totally right. Like I think we're talking about ways we could be better, but we're certainly not. This is the world we have, and it's an okay world.
Yeah.
Anyhow, on to other items. Question about TLS timeouts?
Yeah, I noticed this, and that's my question. Like, we have TLS timeout hard coded to 16 seconds in the code. It seems plenty, but sometimes it would be nice to be configurable to test a few things. Does anyone have any context on why? And this is also like kind of old code that, we have for ages. So I think some of the Git logs got lost in the buck to CMake transition, I think. And any opposition to making it configurable?
You thinking a build time or a config time flag?
Config time flag. But I haven't looked deeply. Maybe build time would be more appropriate.
Whatever.
Okay.
No opposition and no memories of how that
Zach,
came to
you're
be.
the only one here that might remember.
Yep. Sorry. No memory.
If I had to guess, I would guess people just picked a number that sounded reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing like maybe some internal Facebook load balancers had 15-second timeouts on requests or something, and I don't know. And someone was like, "Oh, we'll just make it go 1 second longer than that in case the load balancer shut off one end and not the other." I don't know.
16 sounds reasonable. Configurable sounds reasonable. Doesn't seem worth a lot of angst. Next up, TLS elections. Sorry,
TSC.
TSC elections.
Sorry, I must have wrote TLS.
What? That's not right.
TLS timeouts and TLS elections. I after our discussion maybe 2 office hours ago, or was it the last one? I submitted nominations to nominate Seth as the TSC chair and to nominate Charville as a TSC member. I know some of us had been interested in bringing Stefano on, and heard from Stefano that he doesn't want to join at this time. But I'd like to bring up these nominations now. We do have a 50% of the TSC here, so technically we could make a TSC voting decision now. I'm not sure. I'd be curious how folks feel about voting on such a thing with only 50% of the TSC here, even if it's in line with the charter. But at the same time, the folks who aren't here have often not been here recently. And so I think maybe there is an argument for us moving forward with a vote.
I don't feel good without them present. For something that feels like it needs urgent action, I would happily act without with the people present. For this, I feel like I'm happy to wait an extra week or two and like prod them.
Cool.
Just I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's the letter of the rule, but it doesn't feel polite.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. So I think with that, that comment is enough for me to say I'll go back and I'll just get in touch with each of these folks individually and see if I can get them to respond on the issue or to get folks to show up to a live meeting for a discussion if that seems like something that needs to happen.
I think doing this in issues seems fine. I think the folks who you are alluding to are fairly active in GitHub.
Yeah.
So I think that will probably be tractable. I suspect the current office hours schedule is not conducive to them. And
Sure.
I'd love to find one that is. But
Yeah.
that is where we are today.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. So I'll follow up on those things.
Yeah, please. I commented on the one. I think I might abstain from the other one.
Sounds good.
Let's see. That's everything we have on our agenda. Maybe to bounce back to the 522 discussion. I have a build off of the main branch running in my on a couple of my machines, and I'll start trying to push that a little bit wider in Collide land, just as a smoke test. And if that looks good, I'll try and cut a 522 this week for a pre-release. There are some approved PRs. If anyone thinks they should go into a 522 versus a 5.3, feel free to just merge them. Like y'all have reasonable judgment, so just kind of do whatever you think makes sense. Feel free to ask me if you want to talk about it. I don't know if that helps you any, Mike, but we could probably cut 522 the next day or two.
Sure, that helps.
No. Let's see, do we have any other things hanging out in that 522 milestone? Process columns user time and system times are incorrect on Apple Silicon. Oh, we should talk about that maybe.
Yeah, I think Stefano and I chatted in the issue a little bit. The proc info, whatever, the task info and the task for PID APIs are entitled and gated. But I haven't had a chance to look deeper into it. Usually I just go through like Apple's open source, repos and try to find the API usage and try to work myself backwards from it. Because the R usage API, there are like 5 flavors of it. And I think we use the
like
V3
Apple.
or V4, and I think there's a new V5, but I'm not sure on which OSs it's present and which it's not.
So I think what I'm really asking is whether this bug should make it into a 5.2.2 or whether it can be deferred to a 5.3.
I think I'm not sure in the sense that, that data is not correct. Well, meaning it's not nanoseconds. At least for the test I've done, it seems something that you have to multiply by somewhat like 40, but I wouldn't count on that necessarily. Maybe it's some specific thing of the hardware I test. So like it's fixed there, but on another hardware is different. I've also seen that with the task for info and task for PID APIs, the information is correct, but then there is all this issue about entitlements and what Osquery then can access with those APIs, because those APIs require more permissions. And the third way I know, well, so internally there is like sort of a third way that the activity monitor uses. I'm not sure what are which are the APIs, but I think that those are pretty hidden, private, and yeah. Anyway, I don't know. It doesn't seem something we can necessarily fix fast.
Is this something that is broken on only M1s? Is this now
Yeah.
broken everywhere?
Only M1.
And this affects the time columns on processes.
Yeah, user time, system time.
I feel like if there's an easy fix for this, then we should try and get a fix out. But if there's not an easy fix for it, it feels very unscoped. And that sounds like that's what Charvel was maybe starting to investigate.
So, oh, sorry. It just occurred to me that the watchdog uses that table results for the Osquery process. Yeah, I think so. We could maybe work around it by using the task info and task for period APIs, because at least you can use them with no permissions for your own process.
On period, yeah.
Although at the same time, okay, the watchdog is on a separate process. Okay. Do you think? I don't know. Well, I have to test. Maybe there are the same issues, even though that the worker is a fork of your own process. I haven't tested if you can query those to the APIs. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
And actually, it's not a fork.
I wonder, yeah, if it might allow it, because if it's code signed, then it's signed by the same identifier. But yeah, I think we need to test that.
Could you two figure out whether this should be considered a release blocking bug?
Yep.
Thanks. I don't even know how to make that judgment call. I feel a little bit like if it's an easy thing to fix, then we should fix it. If it impacts the watchdog, then I think it's probably release blocking. If it's just cosmetic on the processes table and it's hard to fix, then maybe we don't need to block on it.
The problem is that if you don't know what those columns unit is, you cannot calculate the percentage used, and then you cannot apply the CPU limit correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about how I feel, Zach. Charvel, you mentioned you were working on it. I don't know what your workload is like. Any chance you can evaluate this one? Or
I haven't worked on it. I just, helping Stefano out with a little bit that I know about the security entitlements that Task for PID and Task Info requires. Happy to kind of, brainstorm with him, async in the issue, and figure out what we can do.
Okay. Mike, I think as far as I know, then this is the only blocker on 522.
Okay.
Maybe we declare it not a blocker, but at least today I think it's the only blocker.
Yeah, it seems to me that if we can get it into 5.22, it makes sense. But if it's going to cause 5.22 to get pushed out a lot, then maybe not calling it a blocker.
I'm worried about the watchdog because that is pretty
Yeah.
widely used. So if this this causes the CPU stuff to be inflated, right? Which means it would cause the watchdog to trigger an order of magnitude before it normally would.
So no, it's the value is lower, so
Oh, deflated? Okay.
yeah, it will not trigger basically until it's using too much CPU. Yeah.
Either way is bad.
One way is less bad.
Yeah, it's less bad, but I could see why you'd have to fix this soon.
Great. On that note, there is a 522 milestone, Mike, and this is the only thing in it.
Okay. If we can push the changelog so that it shows what has been worked on recently.
I will
and-
try and iterate on the changelog to get the dropped tables into it. While we're talking changelog, so the last time we made a big release and then made a point release before we declared it stable, I just rolled the changelog together into the point release. So I think there's no 5.0 changelog, there's only a 5.01 changelog. Do people want to see a 5.20, 5.21, and 5.22 changelog, or just one big 5.22 changelog?
You can go ahead and retitle it pending 5.2.2 changelog if you want.
No, I mean, I'm just curious what people want to see. Like, a month from now, looking back.
Are the releases going to be removed from the release page?
The GitHub one?
The pre-release, yeah. From the GitHub
I don't
tags.
know. I'm unlikely to delete the tags, but I might delete the artifacts.
Yeah, if you delete the artifacts, then no problem.
And they'll never be declared stable. Like, they'll just always stay in a pre-release state.
Yeah, except for the ones that went out to Chocolatey, right?
I think those got pulled back. I think Thor
Okay.
pulled them back. I couldn't figure out how, but I think Thor did.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be accidentally running 5.2.0.
Okay, sounds like no one cares what I do with the changelog, so I'll just aggregate it all into one because it's slightly easier. But
I'd prefer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think the users are most interested in between two declared stable releases. What are the changes?
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I'll just roll everything forward then.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? If not, probably we break. Thank you all for your time, and good luck with the process table.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.